Today I'm installing new shocks and they're gonna feel amazing and look 1,000 times better than the ones it has on now. Especially since the current ones are so dirty that they're basically camouflage. But I'm gonna start with the rear ones first because they're easier to install and I'm pretty sure they're both blown out. So after spraying WD-40 with the 14mm socket, I removed the two bolts holding the shock in place and that thing was fried. The only way to take it out was to beat it with the hammer. Even the bushings were baked. But I was blown away by the comparison. It was like a you versus the guy she told you not to worry about type thing. So after putting on the new bushings, I went underneath the truck to slap it on the hanger. But it's important to hand tighten the top bolt because the shock needs to be compressed in order for it to slide into the bottom hanger. And once everything was tightened up, I went over to the other side and removed it with the same difficulties of having to hammer it out. But this is what I meant by saying both shocks were blown. You see how both of the old shocks easily compress and stay compressed? Well, it's not supposed to work that way. A good functioning shock takes a lot of force to compress, and when you let go of it, rebounds back to its position. Its job is to basically stabilize the spring, so when you're going over bumps, the car isn't bouncing up and down uncontrollably. But more on that later in the video because there's no point being back here now that they're both installed, so it's time to move on to the front. And changing out the front shocks are just as easy, but for these, you need to take some weight off the wheels. So once it was lifted a bit, I sprayed some WD-40 on the bolts and pulled out the only tools I needed, a ratchet and a wrench. And after taking off the nut from the bottom, I went around to remove the nut from the top, but when I tried loosening it, it started spinning the entire shock, so I picked up oil filter pliers and held it in place to allow it to break free. And with that out of the way, I went underneath to push out the bolt and tap out the shock so I could pull it out. And to no surprise, that thing was shot. I'm embarrassed to say that I was driving around like that for 3 years. But whatever, you live and you learn. So after putting on the hardware, putting the shock back in was easy. Everything went on the same way it came off, except the top bolt, which uses an Allen key to hold it in place. I don't know who invented that, but kudos to them. That's a genius idea. But once the driver's side was on, I repeated the same process on the passenger side. And upon taking it off, I was again disappointed. That made it 4 for 4 shocks that were completely blown on this 1986 pickup, which is most likely the reason why it ran rough and squeaked anytime I went over a bump. But finally, after running more than 350,000 miles, this truck is gonna feel brand new with all new blue and yellow Bilsteins on all 4 corners. So all there's left to do is to clean up, because with the dirt bike secure, it's time to go to the desert to test them out.